The sun was already falling when Eli Ward shoved the shovel into the earth and heard nothing. No scrape, no weight, just the hollow whisper of dust. He straightened slowly, breath harsh through cracked lips, sweat cutting clean rivers down his dirt-caked face. The last furrow of his field lay open like a wound, and there was nothing left to plant, nothing left to hope for. Wind pushed through the dry corn stalks that hadn't grown past his knees. The sound was like bones clicking in the dark. He wiped his hands on his trousers, took one long look at the dead land, then turned toward the old mule waiting by the fence. The creature brayed once, long and low, as if it understood what was coming. Eli didn't answer. He just reached in his pocket and thumbed the few coins there. $15. The last of everything. The town of Dustwater shimmered on the horizon, nothing but a crooked line of roofs and smoke in the dying light. The market was half empty, half asleep. The air smelled of tobacco, sweat, and spoiled peaches. Men leaned on posts and watched flies crawl over their hands. Somewhere, a harmonica played the same sad tune it had played for 20 years. Eli walked through the stalls, ignoring the calls of traders hawking rusted pans and fake gold dust. He passed a stand stacked with jars of snake oil, a rack of used rifles, a pile of broken dreams. Then he saw it. At the back of a wagon, a weathered old tent lay folded, its canvas bleached to the color of bone. The trader behind the wagon was a wiry man with eyes like dull steel and a voice that rasped like sandpaper. "Belonged to a man once," he said, before Eli could speak. Said it brought him dreams, or ghosts, depending which way the wind blew. Eli squinted at the tent. How much? 15. It was a foolish price. It was also exactly what he had. Eli turned the coins in his palm, watching them glint in the harsh light. The trader spat, then added quietly, "Don't pitch it near the wind." Eli handed him the money. "Ain't no wind left out there anyway." The trader didn't smile. "Then it'll find you." By the time Eli reached the edge of the desert, night had bled into the sky. A thin moon hung above the dunes, pale as a scar. He unrolled the tent on a patch of high sand, the fabric stiff, smelling of smoke and something older, something buried deep. The stakes groaned as he drove them down. He built a fire from mesquite branches, their crackle sharp against the silence. The flames danced low and orange, licking the edges of the tent as the wind stirred again, whispering dry secrets through the sagebrush. Eli sat cross-legged beside the fire and poured a tin cup of water, staring into the flicker. His reflection looked like another man's face, one older, lonelier, hollowed by years of silence. He whispered toward the dark, "Mary, you still watchin'? You see what's become of me?" The desert didn't answer, only sighed. Then he heard it. Laughter, soft at first, like the chime of silver jewelry in the distance. He lifted his head. The sound came from the dunes beyond the tent, drifting on the wind that wasn't supposed to blow. Eli stood slowly, hand brushing against the handle of his old rifle. The firelight threw long shadows over the sand, stretching toward the sound. A second laugh followed the first, low, warm, close enough that it stirred the hair at the back of his neck. Then he saw them, 3 figures walking out of the haze, their forms painted in moonlight. The first wore white, her step gentle as the wind itself. The second wore red, her eyes sharp, alive. The third, black as the night around her, moved silent, her gaze fixed straight on him. They stopped a few paces away. None of them seemed to breathe. The woman in white smiled first. "You're far from town, farmer." Eli swallowed, voice rough. "Ain't much left in town." The woman in red tilted her head, eyes glinting with mischief. "Then you're where you belong." He stepped back, hand still on his rifle. "What do you want?" The one in black finally spoke, her voice soft as falling ash. "We came because you called us." "I didn't call nobody." "You did," she said. "Every night for 3 long years." The fire popped between them. The woman in white knelt and reached out, fingers grazing the flame without burning. "Lie beside us, Eli Ward. You've been alone too long." He stared. "How do you know my name?" She only smiled. The woman in red stepped closer, her eyes catching the firelight. "You paid $15 for a place to rest. Let it be here." The desert wind picked up, swirling the sand around their feet. Eli's heart thudded heavy in his chest. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. He dropped his hand from the rifle. The one in black lifted the tent flap and whispered, "Come inside." He hesitated a breath longer, then stepped into the glow of the firelit canvas. Inside, the air was warm, smelling faintly of rain, something he hadn't smelled in years. The three women followed, their shadows bending and merging with his. They sat around him, close enough that he could feel their breath. The woman in white touched his shoulder. "You once had love. I lost it." The woman in red traced her finger along the edge of his palm. "You once had fire. It burned out." The woman in black leaned forward until her face was inches from his. "You once had a name the desert still remembers." Eli's throat tightened. "That name's dead." Outside, the wind howled like a wounded thing. The woman in red smiled faintly. "Names don't die, farmer. They wait." Eli's gaze dropped to the firelight flickering through the tent's seams. The light pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. For the first time in years, he felt warmth spread through his chest. Uneasy, alive, frightening. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. The woman in white answered, her voice no louder than breath. "Tomorrow, you'll have a visitor from the past." Eli frowned, but before he could speak, the flames guttered. The tent shivered. The wind screamed, and then fell silent. The three women stood. The woman in black brushed her hand against his cheek, cold as moonlight. "Sleep. The desert will decide if you wake." Then they were gone. Eli stepped outside, blinking at the sudden emptiness. The dunes stretched endless beneath the silver sky. Only their footprints remained, trailing off until they vanished into nothing. He looked at the tent, its canvas glowing faintly in the dark, then up at the stars trembling over the horizon. The wind shifted again, warm and sharp. For a moment, he thought he heard laughter, three voices twining in the air. He sat beside the fire until dawn, waiting for the desert to speak again. But it never did. Not yet. The mule was braying before the sun had even cleared the ridge. Eli Ward opened his eyes to a white blaze spilling through the tent seams. The air felt heavy, wrong, like the desert was holding its breath. He pushed outside and squinted. The sand shimmered like a lake of glass. The footprints, the women's footprints, were still there in the dust, circling the tent, then vanishing halfway up the dune. Eli crouched and touched one of the prints. The sand was cool, damp. He froze. Moisture in this place. Impossible. His mule brayed again, louder this time, eyes rolling white toward the horizon. Eli followed its gaze. A figure was riding slow through the morning haze, dust rising in long, tired ribbons behind the horse. Eli's gut turned to stone. The man rode like he owned the world, back straight, badge glinting, hat low. The sound of the horse's hooves reached Eli in slow, echoing thuds. Silas Crane. Eli didn't move. Silas stopped 10 paces away, boots creaking as he dismounted. He looked the same, lean face, gray stubble, eyes like flint. But time had made him colder, his smile smaller, his hand closer to his gun. "Been a while," Silas said. His voice carried the dry rasp of too many cigarettes and too much law. "Didn't think you were still hanging on out here." Eli stood silent. The wind tugged at his coat. Silas took a folded paper from his pocket and let it snap once in the wind before holding it out. "Eviction notice. Signed by Judge Rollins, backed by Mr. Larkin himself. You're sitting on land worth digging under, and that means it's time you moved along." Eli didn't take it. 3 days, Silas said. After that, they'll come with fire. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Eli's voice came low. "You working for Larkin now?" Silas smirked. "Pays better in honesty. You ought to try it." He stepped closer. Eli could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You remember what you used to be, Eli? Before you got soft? Before the widow?" Eli's jaw tightened. "You best ride on." Silas stared at him for a long, measured beat. "You ain't got it in you no more." He slapped the eviction notice against Eli's chest and turned back to his horse. 3 days. Well, the fire takes it all. He rode off slow, dust trailing like smoke behind him. The paper hung in Eli's hand long after Silas disappeared. The sound of the mule's breathing was the only thing that moved. When Eli looked down, the page was blank. Not a word, not a seal, just white, like it had never been written on. He stared until his eyes watered. Then the ink bled through, slow and black, forming words as if an invisible hand were writing them. The law rides for you. Eli dropped it. The letters vanished. The paper dry again, plain and harmless. He backed away. The wind shifted, carrying a faint scent of rain again. He turned toward the tent. Its fabric rippled once, like something breathing inside. By nightfall, the world was copper red. The fire burned low, and the desert stretched wide and waiting. Eli sat cross-legged, staring at the rifle across his knees. He hadn't touched it in years. The wood felt like a ghost under his palms. He heard it then, the voice soft close. "You kept your promise too long, Eli Ward." He looked up. The woman in white stood at the edge of the firelight. Her eyes shimmered like reflections on still water. "You said you'd never take a life again," she whispered. "And so the desert took yours, piece by piece." He swallowed. "You weren't real." "Neither is peace," she said. The wind rose, and behind her appeared the woman in red, her smile sharp. "The law rides for you," just as she said. "Are you going to wait for the fire to take what's left?" Eli's hands clenched around the rifle. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman in red circled the fire, each step silent, deliberate. "You already know. You called for us when you traded your last breath of hope for that tent." "And her?" Eli asked, nodding toward the dark beyond them. From the shadows, the woman in black emerged. Her eyes were night itself. She didn't speak. She only held out her hand. In her palm rested 3 silver bullets, gleaming faintly in the firelight. Eli stared. "I told Mary I'd never." "She's the one who sent us," said the woman in white. The air turned colder. The flames bent toward the tent, as if drawn by something unseen. Eli shook his head, stepping back. "She's gone. She's watching," the woman in red murmured. "And she's waiting for you to remember who you were before the dirt claimed you." The woman in black stepped forward, placing the bullets at his feet. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low as thunder in the distance. "When the wind carries dust instead of rain, you'll know it's time." Eli bent down, fingers trembling as they brushed the bullets. The metal was cold, colder than truth. He looked up, but the 3 women were gone. The fire sputtered, hissing like it had burned through blood. Eli sat alone again, the bullets in his lap. Each one was etched with something faint, words so small they could barely be seen. Heart, memory, justice. He turned them over and over until dawn cracked the horizon open. By morning, the clouds had gathered, thick, heavy wrong, the kind of storm that never meant rain. Eli hitched the mule and rode to the ridge overlooking Dustwater. From there he could see Larkin's men moving through town, smoke rising where they tested their torches. His land, his home, was marked. He tightened his grip on the reins. The leather creaked. The tent stood behind him on the dune, rippling in the wind like it was alive. He spoke softly to it. "You said I'd have a visitor from the past. Well, he's come, and so's the fire." The tent fluttered, a low hum rising from its seams, like breath or whisper. Eli reached into his pocket, pulled out the bullets, and slid them into the rifle's cylinder one by one. The click of each chamber echoed like footsteps in an empty church. He mounted the mule, the sun bleeding through the clouds like spilled oil. The wind carried a sound across the dunes, distant laughter, soft and familiar. He looked back once more. The tent's shadow stretched long behind him, rippling like a flag in a storm. "All right," he said under his breath, voice dry, steady. "If ghosts want company, they'll get it." He rode toward Dustwater as the first crack of thunder rolled across the sky. And behind him, unseen, the tent glowed faintly in the rising dark, its canvas breathing slow and deep, waiting for what the wind would bring next. The wind screamed first, then came the thunder. Eli Ward stood in the open doorway of his barn as the sky tore itself apart. Lightning split the black, white fire crawling across the desert floor. The air reeked of ozone and gunpowder. Out in the distance, along the ridge that marked the edge of his land, came the flicker of torches, too many to count. They were coming. He laid his hand on the rifle resting across a hay bale. The 3 silver bullets gleamed faintly in the flashes of lightning. The 4th chamber sat empty, as he'd always left it. The mule brayed in the corner, stomping the ground in panic. Eli whispered, "Easy now, old friend." His voice was steady, too steady, the kind of calm that only came when there was nothing left to lose. Then he saw them, riders breaking over the ridge, black silhouettes swallowed by the storm. Their laughter carried across the thunder, cruel and hollow. Larkin's men. Eli stepped outside. The rain hadn't come yet, only dust and heat and lightning. His boots sank in the softening sand as he moved toward the center of his dying field. The torches fanned out, forming a half circle. Shadows of rifles glinted. Horses pawed the dirt, anxious and wild. A voice rose above the wind, smooth, heavy, certain. Eli Ward. The man himself rode forward. Wade Larkin, thick coat flapping like wings, his silver spurs flashing. 3 days I gave you, he shouted, and you waste them hiding in the dirt. Eli didn't answer. Larkin smiled, baring teeth. You could have taken the coin. You could have lived easy. Now you'll die poor, same as you lived. Eli raised his head. You done talking? Larkin's smirk faltered. What was that? Eli's hand closed around the rifle. I said, are you done talking? The first shot tore the night apart. One torch exploded into sparks. A man fell from his horse before the sound even reached them. Then the desert came alive. Gunfire cracked and echoed off the dunes. Horses screamed. Sand and thunder mixed into a single roar. Eli moved like a ghost through the lightning, firing once, twice, 3 times. Each shot a whisper, each strike true. The men shouted in panic. He's behind the tent. No, by the well. But he was everywhere and nowhere, the storm itself. A bullet grazed his shoulder. He barely flinched. Blood mixed with dust running down his sleeve. He reloaded without looking, eyes locked on the flashes of fire ahead. In one lightning strike, he saw them. 3 shapes standing in the rainless storm, distant but clear. The woman in white lifted her hand, pointing to the left. The woman in red smiled, her lips mouthing a name. The woman in black stood behind them, silent, unmoving. Eli turned left, fired. A rider fell. The storm howled louder. He felt no fear, only the rhythm of the fight, the pull of the trigger, the recoil, the silence between shots. It was all memory. It was all coming back. Ward the Widowmaker. That name echoed faintly in the thunder, like the desert itself remembered. Another flash, another man down. Eli moved through the smoke, his coat snapping in the wind. The torches flickered out one by one until only darkness and lightning remained. He heard Larkin shouting, "Surround him! Burn it all!" The men hurled their torches toward the barn, the house, the tent. Flames caught, spreading like hungry mouths across the dry wood. Eli's gaze locked on the tent. For a moment, he thought he saw movement inside, like hands pressing against the canvas from within. The glow from the fire made it shimmer gold. Then the storm broke. Wind slammed across the land, tearing torches from hands, flinging sand into eyes. The fire hissed and died under the weight of the gale. And through it all came the voice, soft, clear, carried on the wind. Now! He turned, leveled his rifle. Larkin stood at the edge of the blaze, pistol drawn, coat soaked in sweat and dust. His grin was twisted, desperate. Never thought I'd see it, Larkin said, spitting. Ward the Widowmaker, the ghost who forgot how to pull a trigger. Eli's voice was calm. You talk too much. You think those bullets will save you? You think ghosts give a damn about you? Larkin sneered. You're just another fool buried by the sand. Eli's finger tightened. Maybe, but the sand remembers. Larkin fired first. The bullet ripped through Eli's coat, grazing his ribs. Eli didn't move. His reply came like thunder. One shot, silver flashing. Larkin stumbled back, clutching his chest. He dropped to his knees, blood dark and thick under the lightning. He laughed once, short and sharp. You think you win, Ward? You just made yourself a ghost again. Eli lowered the rifle. Rain began to fall, slow, heavy drops that sizzled against the sand. The first rain in years. Larkin collapsed, face to the dirt. Eli turned toward the tent. The rain hit it like applause, drumming on its surface until it shone like silver. He walked closer, the rifle heavy in his grip. Inside the flickering light, he saw them again. 3 women standing together, their outlines made of shadow and storm. The woman in white smiled. "The fire's out." The woman in red tilted her head. "You remember who you are now." The woman in black stepped forward and touched his chest, right above the wound. "She's waiting." Eli's breath caught. "Mary." A faint warmth spread through him. Rain mixed with tears, blood, and something lighter. The rifle slipped from his hands and fell into the mud. He looked down at the ground. Larkin's body was gone. So were the others. Only the desert remained, clean, wet, and new. The storm roared once more and then began to fade, drifting toward the horizon. Eli looked back at the tent. Its glow dimmed, shrinking to a soft pulse, then stillness. He stood there, soaked and trembling, watching the desert breathe again. The rain kept falling, soft and steady, washing the blood from his hands. When he finally spoke, it was to no one at all. "Guess the wind found me after all." He turned toward the rising light in the east, the rifle left behind, and walked into the storm until he vanished into it. Behind him, the tent stood untouched, shimmering faintly under the rain, whispering with the voices of the wind. 3 women laughing, 1 man breathing her name. The wind howled low across the canyon, dragging the last whispers of gunfire into silence. Smoke hung in the air, curling around the wrecked tent like the ghost of something sacred. The dawn came bruised, red and gold bleeding together on the rim of the desert. Silas stood alone in that ruin, his breath slow, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the storm had died. The sand around him was littered with brass casings and blood. The outlaws, what was left of them, lay twisted in the dust, their guns scattered, faces pale in the dim light. 3 women stood not far behind him, their dresses torn, faces marked with dust and tears, but eyes burning bright with something fierce. Relief, awe, maybe even fear. Silas holstered his pistol, the movement deliberate, quiet. The weapon had once belonged to the Confederate officer he'd killed 30 years ago, the one who'd stolen his family, his farm, his peace. He'd buried that life, or so he'd thought. But the desert has a way of pulling up the past, bone by bone. "Is it over?" one of the women asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer at first. The wind did that for him, sweeping through the tent poles with a hollow wail, like a hymn for the dead. He looked toward the sun. "It's over," he said finally. "For them." One of the horses whinnied from the ridge, restless from the smell of gunpowder. Silas walked to it, his boots crunching on broken glass and sand. His body moved like an old machine, stiff, deliberate, but his eyes were young again. The desert had burned away the years in a single night. The eldest of the women stepped forward, her face streaked with tears. "You could have left us," she said. "When they came, you could have run." Silas turned. "I've done enough running," he said. His voice was gravel. It was time to stand. She watched him, searching for something behind his eyes. Then, softly, "You were one of them once, weren't you? A gunman." He looked at the sky, where the light was breaking wider now. "I was a lot of things," he said. "None I'm proud of." The women gathered the supplies, whatever was left unburned. One of them folded a torn piece of fabric, blue as twilight, and pressed it into his hand. "For what you did," she said. Silas looked at it for a long moment. "Keep it," he said. "You'll need it more than I will." He mounted his horse, the saddle creaking under his weight. The animal pawed at the dirt, ready to move. Behind him, the tent still fluttered weakly, the canvas blackened with smoke. It had been bought for $15, but what it had cost since could not be counted in coin. Before he turned to go, he looked once more at the 3 women, standing in the blood-red dawn beside that ruined tent. "If anyone comes a skin," he said, "you tell him the desert took care of its own." Then he rode out into the wide and waiting silence. By midday, the storm had vanished, leaving only a clean blue sky and the shimmer of heat rising from the ground. Tracks led away from the tent, one horse heading north, the others west. The sheriff's posse found what was left hours later: 6 dead outlaws, 1 burned wagon, and a scattering of stories that would twist and stretch across saloon tables for decades to come. They said the farmer had come from nowhere, carrying an old pistol and a Bible with half its pages torn. They said he faced 10 men and left none standing. Some swore the women had been angels in disguise, testing the courage of mortal souls. Others said the tent itself was cursed. Whoever slept in it saw visions of the dead. Years later, travelers still came across the ruins, half buried in the sand. The fabric of that old tent, frayed and sun-bleached, still flapped in the wind. At night, when the desert went quiet, some swore they heard voices, soft laughter, the jingle of spurs, the faint hymn of a harmonica drifting from nowhere. An old storyteller would lean close to the fire then, his face caught in the glow, his voice low as thunder far off. They say the farmer bought that tent for $15, he'd whisper. But what he found under it was worth far more. Justice, maybe, or redemption, or the truth that no man can outrun what he once was. The crowd would go still, only the crackle of fire and the desert wind between them. And in that silence, the legend would rise again, about a lonely farmer, a desert tent, and 3 mysterious women who changed the course of one forgotten night. A tale born of blood and dust, a tale the desert itself remembers. The legend of the desert tent.